Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to week 13, the week 13 devlog for Gatecrashers. This is a pretty important week as while the change list is relatively modest, this is the week that the playtest builds went out. So most of the focus was on getting kind of everything ready and nice and stable for the playtests. So this is a closed playtest. I sent it to 5 friends and coworkers, and the idea is that they had about an hour to spare to play the game, and they would do it over a Discord call with me while they were streaming the game to me. And they would have recorded their footage too. However, it turns out that when you're recording and streaming this game, it drops to about 2 FPS. So that was the first bit of feedback that I received, which is, hey, maybe there's a couple places that I need to optimize. So we'll get into more of their feedback. I actually sat down for the first of these this week itself. So yeah, we'll cover that later in the video. But first, let's go over our changes. Alright, so the first of our changes was to the main menu. As I mentioned last week, the main menu would have tabs similar to the status window on the map. And so we have a status tab, which shows your status effects and HP and energy. We have a equip tab, which shows your current equipment as well as your weapon elements and ailments and any resistances and weaknesses to different damage types. And we have a skills tab, which shows all the skills that you have, both active and passive ones, as well as the amount of skill points you have, and the amount of experience that you've accumulated. So how much till you're max level. And on top of the main menu being tabbed and the player being able to cycle between them, it is also contextual. So when you pick a sub-menu, such as if you pick the skills menu, or if you pick the equip sub-menu, then the main menu will swap over to the appropriate tab for that menu. You can still cycle after doing that, but it'll basically switch to whatever is the most relevant. I got some feedback to include a summary tab, which sort of gives an at a glance for all of those. But yeah, other than that, it's been a pretty successful change. Alright, next up we have changes to the equip scene. This is the submenu where you go and configure all of your gear. So for the longest time, we were showing the wrong information. There was this weird floating point error that was causing the stats to go outside of the bounds of the scene. And so those changes have been, some changes have been made to fix those errors. And those functions have been genericized so that I can actually use any sort of stat display kind of thing, right, in other windows. And we'll see another example of that later in this video. But yeah, there still is some more work that needs to be done. Mainly, we need to add in a way to show the stats of dual-wielded weapons, right? Sort of individualized stats for each of the weapons that you have equipped. But one of the benefits of the new equip scene is that we're offloading some of that information onto the main menu tab for the actor. And so sort of between the two of those, right, we're actually able to pretty nicely display kind of all the information that we want, and we can potentially have more space for the gear itself, right, making that choice a little bit easier on the players. So the first of the windows that benefits from the equip scene changes is the scan window. The scan window has been quote unquote improved, but basically we're using the same functions that we are using in the equip scene in the scan window now. And so yeah, if a change needs to happen in the equip scene, it'll also change the scan window, and I don't have to change the code in 2 different places. One thing that has occurred to me with the scan window is I may actually want to be showing more information, such as information about items that are dropped from enemies. Maybe it's not unlocked immediately, but after you defeat a couple of them, right, that information may be available. But yeah, we'll continue improving this, the scan window. I know that I want the actor's equipment to show up when you have an actor selected, because that actually caused a bit of confusion during playtest, which I'll get into later. Okay, so we have the level up column. This is a small window that currently shows when a character levels up, and it displays what stats have improved and whether they have picked up a skill point. The current method of doing it, I don't think is ideal, and it actually caused a performance issue during the playtest. So I'm going to keep working on it. Because it previously had a dedicated window, but the timing of that is a little bit weird because of when and the function that is used to give EXP out. So I went with a more inefficient method, but what that caused on the playtester's end is for, like a big frame drop every time they level up, which is not the best feeling. So we'll work on improving that. Okay, this was a relatively minor change, but before the playtest builds went out, I decided to make shields go in the mod slot as opposed to the defense slot. This is because I realized that even though I'd initially conceived there to be a trade-off between shields and armor, where shields give you an HP buffer while armor gives you actual damage mitigation, that it was causing all of these kind of more glass cannon-y like builds to happen on grunts of all people, right? So you were gravitating towards giving a lot of HP, but they would kind of just die out of nowhere. That's because you were not wearing armor well into B1F. And so this choice made it such that you have a more rounded kit, and that additional shield stacking becomes a choice with a trade-off compared to other mods, such as stuff that increases various stats. Alright, now for the longest section of the video, which is let's go over the notes from the first playtest. So this playtester was my coworker Isaiah. Those of you who know me IRL know who that is. But yeah, I sent the build to them and sort of watched them play, right? And was available for them to ask me questions, because that's a way that I can sort of figure out what's causing comprehension complexity, right, as they're playing through the game. So they booted up the game, ran into some frame rate issues because we were trying to stream and record at the same time, which is not advisable on their PC. So that was the first bit of feedback, is that, hey, I'm getting some major frame drops, right? Maybe optimize this a little bit. It was totally fair. Then they interacted with the first medical station and sort of explained like how healing and stuff works. And they were confused by the anchor choice. Later on they kind of got it, but they kind of felt that like it should be automatic, such that like when you interact with a medical station, it sets up the anchor to whatever that is. I hadn't really thought about that. I thought maybe there could be utility in getting to choose where to set your anchor, but I think that's a good bit of feedback as well. So they found the first shortcut directly outside the med station area very early, which is really cool. But it also meant that they skipped past a lot of intro stuff. They still managed to find their way into that FOE room, right, and were able to loot the items in the FOE room without actually having to deal with the FOE, which is good. That's exactly how we wanted that encounter to go down. However, they missed their carbon knife, right, and instead picked up that iron wrench that's in the room. So the iron wrench was the weapon that was sort of carrying them through the sort of first part of the game. And with the iron wrench, they actually had a pretty decent advantage against the hallway FOEs that are in that sort of second section of floor 1A, which is really good. So they got to the Recombinator, asked me some questions about the breaking down and research. They didn't really understand research, and I'll get into why that is, right? but they understood the sort of immediate analysis. So when they actually picked up the dart gun and the ammo, they went back to the recombinator, sold one copy of the ammo in order to just make sure that they have ammo kind of throughout. Which is very good, right? That's sort of exactly the kind of thing that we want players to kind of understand, right, and be able to build strategies around. So they cleared the sort of back half of floor 1A, right? I noticed that they weren't breaking down materials, and I think it's because they thought they had to hold them in their inventory for research as opposed to selling them, right? Just immediately. And that brought up the feedback of like, hey, maybe there should be a quick sell option, something that like the moment that you hit a recombinator, it automatically sells the stuff, right? And I have mixed feelings about that, right? Because there is an advantage to doing quick sell, right? Like it definitely makes a lot of quality of life, right? However, since we want the research recipes to pop up as you are selling them, right? So that you know, like, hey, this is there are discoveries to be made, rather than the discoveries being automatically made for you. I don't know. I don't know if like that's necessarily the best option, but I think we definitely need to telegraph that, hey, you have to sell this within the like you have to sell it in the recombinator to be able to research stuff. Okay, so they got to the class change area, and I sort of explained, hey, here's what the different classes do. So they end up going with a grunt, 2 sneaks, and a scion. And that's when I noticed a bug that I didn't call out was a bug, but it definitely affected their gameplay decisions from that point on, which is that when you go to switch your class, we respec you. And I had an error in the respec formula, so they actually got 2 skill points as opposed to 1, right? And so they weren't able to choose one skill or the other, but rather they sort of were able to pick both the sort of starter skills. Which didn't break the entire playtest, but I do think definitely changed how they were valuing certain skills, right? Because they had both of them available as opposed to one over the other. Okay, so they also managed to find that second shortcut, the one that is next to the heal station and the class change area, very early, which is cool, right? I'm glad that the shortcuts are discoverable, and I'm especially glad that it didn't break progression in any like major way, right? That like it felt like just, hey, here's an alternate route, right, to exploring this larger area. And so that brings us to the engine room. So in the engine room, right, they had a bit of feedback that I think is pretty pertinent, which is that they want the engine room doors to be numbered, or in some kind of sign to be over them, so there isn't confusion between opening the left or right door. I anticipated that this would be a point of difficulty, and I think like that's a pretty elegant solution. So I'll probably go with that. I was thinking about like actually like changing the placement of the terminal, right, so that it's a little bit more obvious. As they were sort of going through the engine room, they spent a fair bit of time here, but it's also like where they were kind of getting their groove, right? So here they were using the field skills, right? Again, they sort of asked about them, and I was able to give them information. They had a couple items like bolt grenades and things stocked up, so they were actually able to take out the heavy loader, right, in one of the side corridors, which they discovered the shortcut for, right, which is again very good, right? They were able to take out one of the heavy loaders, and I noticed that like they were actually planning a little bit, right? Like they were switching the party's order, right? They were sort of sequencing their moves, right? And that was a really good feeling to sort of see in action that like, hey, they've cottoned on to like the depth of it, right? They aren't sort of face rolling the encounter, which is, I think, good. It means job done, right? That this kind of fixed resource kind of battle, right, is something that has paid off. Now, in the engine room, they had some confusion over the engine leeches, right? Their latch-on ability, and it's because when you have safeguard up, you have Aegis, and Aegis actually resists their attempts to latch on, right? But this was sort of causing. The way that it was showing in the game was that the latch on was happening and then being immediately removed, so they weren't really seeing the effects of it. So they were like, "What's going on here, right? Why are they wasting a turn?" Which is fair. From that point on, yeah, they got to the back half of the engine room, and I sort of noticed them ask me less questions and take more charge of the playthrough. So they cleared both the left and right hallways before going for the back center, right, in order to open the way. They got really ammo conscious once they set up 2 guns right on one of the snakes, right? Once they had a dual wielding snake, right, they were able to, yeah, they were much more judicious about using early bird as opposed to using the double shot, right? And I also noticed that in the back half, right, of the engine room, they started getting much more conscious about damage types. In part because the encounters there's a real dependence between one or the other. Okay, so once they had cleared the engine room area, they got to the light bridges area, which they actually missed the first time around because of the shortcut that they took. They chose not to engage with the Nacterops, right? They also almost missed the light bridge terminal, so I think I need to put the light bridge terminal a little where the chest is on the way out. I think that's where I need to put the terminal. I unfortunately cannot put the terminal in that room because then we're showing the reloading of the area, right, in like a very obvious way. But maybe there's like a graphical trick or something I can do, right, to help bridge that over. Yeah, by the time that they got the hazard suit, they had a full set of gear for all party members, right? To go off to the next area with. In terms of overall stuff, their playtime was around 1 hour 13 minutes. And also I made a note here about how in terms of field skills they were consistently using safeguard and camouflage, but not EX sense like at all. I think this is fine because EX sense really shines in that the back half the floor 1B area, because so far we are moving through more comprehensible spaces, but once you get into a maze you really need that sort of top view kind of thing. But maybe this is a note for me to make the utility of EX sense more apparent to new players. Okay, so yeah, that was the playtest. They were able to get through successfully, no crashes, right? Just a couple, what I noticed were like description mistakes and spelling mistakes, right? And also implementation mistakes, right? But nothing that caused the playtest to kind of crater right in the middle. Okay, so in terms of feedback, I've gone over the frame drops, I've gone over setting the anchor for the med station, how that should be automatic. There was an interaction that they had some useful feedback on, which is that, you know how when you clear sort of a region of a floor, right, and the encounter indicator turns green, they felt that if you investigate a junk pile when it's green, you shouldn't be ambushed, right? I think they were implying that there shouldn't be an encounter either. Let me test that, because right now, in order to go through junk piles without risking an encounter, you have to set up camouflage ahead of time. That makes camouflage way more useful than the other abilities. But if there's a non-sneak way of diffusing junk piles by just sort of clearing out that area of the floor, maybe I'm okay with that, right? Like maybe that's that benefits other party compositions. Other stuff for feedback, engine room numbered, yeah, we already went over that. They also wanted to be able to override the current field skill. Right now, when you activate a field skill, you sort of have to wait till it ticks down before you can do another. I think that's a good piece of feedback, right? So I'm a fan of it, and that's been implemented. Big QOL. They want the ability to save even for this playtest build, and I think that's like if the playtest is going up to an hour, I think that's pretty fair. So yeah, I'll probably work on some version of saving. In terms of saving and rules about saving, right? Like I think it's pretty fair to just let people save and load kind of wherever, right? I'm not too worried about like sort of autosave moments and player sort of commitment of things, right? The game is already like pushing back against you enough, right? So I think that maybe there's I think the options and stuff of the game shouldn't be fighting you as well. Though there's definitely like a design case to be made. I don't know. I've heard those arguments about like no, it should be one save slot and it should be autosave. I'm like, well, maybe, right? But like I don't know. Like I feel free to chime in the comments how you feel about games that restrict your save slots as opposed to games that allow sort of saves coming. I feel pretty ambivalent about it, but maybe it's a more important decision than I'm giving it credit for. Last bits of feedback. They liked the med station charges. I wasn't expecting it to be a mechanic that people had strong feelings on, but apparently, yeah, they liked that the game was making them budget their healing a little bit, which maybe that's something that like Isaiah enjoys, right? So I'm glad they liked it. I was expecting more like negative feedback on the way that I've set up med stations, so I'm sort of surprised that they enjoyed that aspect of it. And then their overall feelings were that it was the game was crunchy and challenging, but fair even for non-RPG player, which is what Isaiah describes themselves as. They definitely play RPGs, but they definitely play more ones on the sort of lighter side. Dungeon RPGs, other than like Etrian, aren't really their thing, and even Etrian, like they gravitate towards the untold games as opposed to the main series. So definitely a lot of useful feedback there. Alright, so as we close up this video, as I was going over the playtest notes and even during the playtest, a part of me got to thinking about class design and what its place is in Gatecrashers. So from an earlier video, you know that that having that sort of classes that have these characteristic skills that you can branch off, right, into variants of those classes, right, in order to specialize, is a thing that has been there sort of since the beginning. But as I design this more and more, and I play this more and more, I realize that gear has an almost overwhelming impact on the design, right? It's so much of the design is based around the acquisition of gear, kitting out your different party members, right? And also their combat identity is defined by what kind of gear they equip. So it got me thinking about the possibility of a classless version of Gatecrashers. What might that look like, just speculatively, right? Now, classless RPGs in sci-fi, right, are like pretty common, largely because many RPGs in the sort of sci-fi realm are coming from Traveler, right? That was an old TTRPG, right? And that already sort of started things kind of like on that trend, right? Where rather than the sort of regimented D&D classes, right, it had more of like a skill system kind of a thing. And this is why like skills and proficiencies are things that you see more in sort of sci-fi games than that. But yeah, it got me thinking about the idea of do I maybe, rather than have classes, right, have sort of either skill trees or like more what I'm thinking of is like feat packages. So similar to how Dungeons & Dragons and Pathfinder approach it, or Lancer for that matter, where you have these feats that you can unlock at 80s level, and then you can invest points in them in order to specialize kind of in them further. So it might be things like there might be a medic feat, right? And at its sort of first level, right, it has maybe a skill that can cure tier 1 negative effects, right? Maybe at its next level, it's able to do that plus give a bit of a shield refund, right? And at its best level, right, it's able to revive somebody, right, with kind of like one HP. And there might be similar things for like a swordsman, right, like a little like feat package, right, and that lets you specialize in melee like slash weapons, right, and be able to unpack those skills from there. And so this essentially has like these sort of like feat kind of features kind of built up, right? Obviously feat design, right, like has its own like merits and demerits, and like while it's very popular, right, like I think like Montico wrote about how it was directly influenced by like Magic the Gathering cards and the idea that some feats are just strictly worse than others, right? But that doesn't have to be the case here, right? Like maybe we could do things a little bit differently. But that's kind of where my mind is at, right? Is that like, is it maybe worth rethinking, right? The sort of class specification, right? When gear and like the research and breakdown, right? All of that stuff is much more important to this game's identity than the things that I'm sort of importing from Wizardry and Etrian, right? And things like that. It could also help this stand out in the DRPG market. I saw a preview for a game called Descent of Lunaris that was pretty dispiriting, honestly, because it was just like, wow, this is just my game, but like with a much better budget, right? And it looks cool as hell, and I really want to play it. But I also like, I'm like, crap, right? Like I really gotta step up my game. So who knows? Maybe this is just like designer insecurity talking, right? But I think there is a vision for a classless version of this game, and I think that by the time I bring this demo to a close, I need to decide what that is, right? I need to decide if that is part of the identity of Gatecrashers or not. Okay, so with that, I'll bring this week's devlog to a conclusion. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And next week, so the playtest builds are out. As I receive feedback, I'll include sections in these that go over the playtest notes. They won't be every week. It really depends on when the testers are available and when I can sit down with them. But next week, I'm gonna truck on ahead with implementing Floor 1B. I think I've refined Floor 1A and V1F as much as possible. Obviously, there can be improvements, but I kind of want to wait for the playtest feedback to come in, right, to know what to change about those. And so, yeah, I want to work on the back half as a demo. So yeah, stay tuned for that. Take care. Peace.